joining us. I'm keeping an eye on LinkedIn to see how many we get popping in. I'm sure you'll be filtering in here shortly. I want to thank you for joining this one. I know that this is not the time you're used to seeing me, and well, I appreciate you coming in. This is a live that kind of means a lot to me and to the two guys who are going to be joining me. I'm sure that many of you are used to seeing Chris at this time, and he's here to talk with me. And then I also have TJ Maassen, terrible words. He will be joining as well, and we are here to talk about ending the stigma. So let me get these guys on.
Howdy.
How's it going?
Good. How are y'all?
All right. So I'm still kind of hoping to get a couple of people tuning in here. It looks like we've got a few kind of filtering in slowly. Here's my comments. All right, so we've got John joining in, and we've got a couple that are kind of filtering in. Maria just showed up. So I want to kind of set the tone here a little bit, kind of how I foresee this going. So we've got the three of us. We all have our own experiences within the system, and obviously also in different parts of the country as well. I'm in Colorado. Chris, you're down in Texas. And TJ, you're in Wisconsin or?
Indiana.
Indiana. I almost moved to Indiana, but I didn't. Okay, so I want to kind of do this as like a roundtable thing. So for everybody who is in the comments, we had Adam show up. Thank you guys, everybody who's jumping in. So for everybody who's in the comments, I'm going to kind of set this up as a roundtable where each of us are going to kind of speak about briefly about our experience, kind of where we're at and what this means to us. And then I'm going to shift over to pulling questions out of our audience. If you have a question for any of us specifically, make that clear in the comment who you're addressing the question to. If it's something more at large, either I will give all of us an opportunity to answer it, or I will just address it to who I think would be the best person to answer it. So, sound good?
Awesome, man.
Sounds good.
All right. So for I guess everybody who's joining in the comments is going to know who I am, at least to some extent. So I'm Nate Winzenried. I'm in Colorado Springs. I spent 11 and a half years in the Colorado Department of Corrections. In the time that I was there, you know, I did a lot as far as change and growth, as far as my personal development and who I strive to be. I earned my bachelor's degree while I was in prison, along with several other college certificates. I was released in 2016 on parole, earned my master's degree while I was on parole, as well as my Six Sigma certification. Again, just putting in that work. Primarily, I've found success in finding work in the call center industry, and my specialization is in workforce management, doing KPI reporting, data analytics, scheduling, call volume forecasting, those kinds of things, but that's really not important. So, Chris, introduce yourself.
So yeah, I'm Chris. I did a little over 8 years, almost 8.5 years in the Texas prison system. So the unit I was at, I was a cop whenever I got arrested. So they had me on a really low-key unit. You know, it was basically like a PC unit. It was a bunch of old guys and ex-cops and ex-lawyers and ex-judges and TDC guards and all that kind of stuff. And they had college there whenever I first got there, but then they decided to pull it off because the average age there was like 50 or something, and they didn't deem it worth having college. So I took a few college classes, and then after I got out, they brought college back. So I'm glad for the guys that are there, but that sucked for while I was there. But I was real active in like the chaplaincy and the faith-based storm. I went to every stinking class they offered. for cognitive development and stuff like that while I was in there.
Okay. Real quick, I just want to answer Maria's question. No, all of my education was paid for out of pocket. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way it was in Texas too. They had some grants, but then they took them away. So
right.
I didn't have to pay for it up front, but I could only take one class per semester, and I have to pay it back as part of my parole fees.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird deal. Like it would have taken me till I got out to get my associates. Like there would have been no chance of me getting my bachelor's unless I didn't make my first parole, which I did, which that was way better than getting a college.
Mine was entirely paid out of pocket. My parents were paying for it mostly, as well as out of my savings. It was one class at a time, and it took me over 9 years to finish my bachelor's degree.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy.
TJ, introduce yourself.
My name is Travis, and I also go as TJ. So I've been out of the system for about 16 years now. I didn't get the joy of going inside prison, but I had about 4 years of supervised probation. So I started that back in 2006 and released about 2009. And during the time that I was on probation, I actually achieved my associate's degree as well in network administration.
Awesome.
And I've been lucky to have. I had a computer IT background for a long time, so I was kind of working in the industry when I got in trouble, and I was lucky enough to find some employers after I graduated. Larger Fortune 100 companies that were willing to take me on and give me a shot. So I got kind of into the data center world, and I used to travel around the country for a couple of my employers like Ashley, and gave me a lot of good experience. And then I got into the consulting world. So I started consulting for companies somewhere in the range of $5 to $10 million organizations. And then kind of over the course of the last, 15 years, I've worked my way up right now where I'm mainly calling on the Fortune 100 customers. So I go to, the big box stores like Walmart and Target and, truck stops and stuff like that, all the national companies. So I go out and I do their IT work in the field now as a field engineer. And so that's kind of what I've been doing in between when I can find a job. I'm always looking to find full-time employment because of all the benefits and the being able to have a paycheck regularly coming in. But I found self-employment I don't get discriminated against, so I've just been kind of by nature had to do that. So that's how it's been going so far.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And I totally understand the job search aspect. I mean, I'm launching my own little consultancy at the moment, but still looking for that full-time job. And that job market is tough. I know that it's tough for a lot of people, but especially when you have the additional burden of that record. No matter how long ago it was, it still seems to become a hindrance.
Pre-adverse action notice is a word that we hear a lot in this world, and we're pretty used to getting. We don't I think Nathan, you said this the other day, we don't get excited when we get a job offer because we know that that's just the beginning of what's going to happen. And I don't even tell people until my first day there. And, I've even heard, I think, after this last story that even after you've worked there for a couple of weeks, it's not always a guarantee either. I think, Chris, you had a story about that with your
I was just fixing to say, I went to work for a major auto parts chain. But I did a post on it the other day, but I'll kind of recap it for those of y'all that didn't see it. So I went to work for him. A buddy of mine that I actually grew up with his older brother. His older brother and I were the same age. So I've known this dude since he was like 7 or 8. And he was the district manager for this chain. And I called him up. He said, yeah, man, go in there, apply, go to the Jacksonville store, apply, and I'll make sure you get hired. And he did, and I got hired. And then 2 weeks later, whenever I put in to be a key holder so I could lock up at night, because I was working in the evenings, I guess HR finally saw it or something. And I walked into work one morning and the manager looked at me and she said, "Come here." And told me, HR called her and said, "You have to let him go as soon as he comes in. He should have never been hired in the first place." And my manager, she knew my whole story. I laid it out to her whenever we got hired, and she was just in tears. She was like, "Man, I'm so sorry. I never thought that this company would be the type of company to do that." And then my buddy called me. He said, "Chris, dude," he said, "Man, I would have never even hired you if I'd have known they were going to do this to you, because I wouldn't want you to have to go through this." And, like I said in my post, man, like, I am not a car guy. I would not have been happy there long term, but I needed a job.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was willing to learn it. When they let me go, which it ended up being a blessing in disguise, because I ended up where I'm at now. But that's a whole other story. But yeah, that's a tough deal, man. Like, I remember thinking, is this the way it's going to be for the rest of my life?
Right.
For one, it was only a $10 an hour job, so it wasn't that great of a job anyway. But I just the frustration and the letdown of, like, God Almighty, man, is this the kind of shit I'm going to have to deal with from now on?
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've been blessed because I've been with the same company. I haven't had to do any more applications. I've been here almost 5 years, so I haven't had to get that continued rejection like, Nathan keeps getting. Not to rub it in your face.
Right.
But
I know exactly what you mean, but
that's just being the real part of it,
I just lost out on a 6-figure job at a mortgage company in town, and right when the pandemic hit, like 3 days in, I got fired from my job, which I worked for a good company, and I thought I was going to be working there and eventually taking my boss's job, and they didn't care about my criminal record because they got a discount on me when I got hired. They kind of knew that going in, and so when I lost that job, we were 3 days away from buying our first house, and it was like I got fired Friday, and we were supposed to close on our first house Monday. And I guess I could have just not told anybody and probably went to the closing and bought the house. And in hindsight, I probably should have now, but I called the bank that Friday and I'm like, "Hey, I don't have a job anymore." And now, because I'm self-employed, if you're self-employed, you can't get mortgage lending until you got 2 years of tax returns and you make a whole bunch of money. And they don't care about any of your other situations. And it's just, you're just out. So not being able to buy a house has been really a hindrance for me to getting anywhere in this world, because that's big thing.
Right. I still end up encountering quite a few guys when they are fresh out, and I hate being the one to do it to them. But all too often these guys come out and they're like, "Oh, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. And, my background is in this, and, I have skills in doing that." And I'm like, the first thing you need to do is just go ahead and temper your expectations because you're probably going to be unemployed for a minute. Start networking with some of the other guys on parole to figure out who will actually hire you. When I got out, again, I left prison with a bachelor's degree. And my first job was making $8.25 an hour, working graveyards at a 7-Eleven in one of the very shitty parts of town.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. And my mindset in taking that job, because I did not want that job and I hated every day that I worked there. But $8.25 is better than zero.
Right.
I mean, and it was something. I worked there for 2.5, 3 months until I got picked up by a call center. And again, it was not a glamorous job. It was as a customer service rep, just taking calls. Again, it was a minimum wage job, $8.25 an hour, but they were a big company and I knew that there was opportunity for growth, and they were a second chance employer, and they gave me that shot. So I started working there. 2 months later, I was given a raise, and 3 months after that, I was promoted into workforce management. And then once I got into workforce management, I was given a raise or a promotion literally every 6 months for the rest of the time I was with that company. And I left there to go work for a buddy of mine who I had met in grad school. Did that for about a year until he actually needed someone. Again, I'm in Colorado. His business is in Indianapolis, so I was working remotely for him, but he finally needed somebody with boots on the ground there in Indy. So I left there, and ever since then, that was in October, and I've been struggling ever since.
Yeah.
I did seasonal driving for UPS, which pays surprisingly well, by the way. So I did that for a couple months over the holidays. I got that contract job with another call center, doing work for them, which was supposed to lead to a full-time position until they turned into total shitbags. So that ended at 60 days when my first contract ended. But in this time, since October, I have had 3 different legitimate in-writing job offers that have hit my desk that I have signed. I have been ready to go. And all 3 of those companies, when they ran the background check, rescinded the job offer.
Mm-hmm.
I am sitting here right now with my 4th job offer. I signed the written job offer today. I had the verbal 2 days ago. But again, we're pending a background check. So, like Travis brought up earlier, getting a job offer does not bring excitement. It brings stress because I don't know if it's real. I don't know if I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to get my hopes up because, again, this is a $60,000 a year job with a huge corporation that, it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
But
Maria
I don't know what
asked
happens.
about expungement and going back to the court, and I'm actually going through that right now. Interestingly enough, I spoke to the district attorney in my case a month ago, and he agreed to reduce my felony to a misdemeanor.
Wow.
Unbelievable
Yeah.
situation, but it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
He was going to do it right after the holiday, and I don't know, it's been the longest 30 days of my entire life. The first 3 days after I found out about it, all I did was cry. My wife would be like, "Why are you crying?" And I was like, "Well, because I got my life back." And immediately after I got that notice, I went out and I applied to be a police officer. I applied to work for some 3-letter government agencies doing IT security. I applied to work for the court system. I literally, the day I had the chance of doing something else great, that's exactly what I did, is I went out and tried to get, maybe back in the system that I was hurt by, because a year ago, I was supposed to go to work for the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. I had a systems administrator job there too, and I was like, you run the background check and you can't have a felony. So
Mm-hmm.
that particular word, people don't really realize it when they get sentenced, but that particular thing just is like the scarlet letter for people. And, in Wisconsin, you had to have been given the opportunity for an expungement at sentencing. It's one of the only few states in the world where that's the way it is. But if you weren't given an opportunity for expungement at the sentencing, there's no recourse. And the governor's office right now has decided that they will only do a pardon if you haven't had a subsequent conviction. And that got me. In my case, I ended up getting a conviction in 2016. I'm a felon, and in the state of Minnesota, a felon cannot possess anything. You cannot possess bullets. You cannot possess a gun.
Right.
You can't possess a shell casing.
Right.
And
Same in
a
Texas.
neighbor of mine was upset with me, and I had friends shooting guns at my house. And the SWAT team came and flashbanged my house and arrested me. I worked for a hospital at the time. I had killer job working as network administrator at a hospital, and I got arrested in the front lobby. So now, to make matters worse, Wisconsin changed the law in 2011, and just my crime is I pulled a gun on somebody that was in my bedroom at 3 a.m. And at the time, it was not legal to use a firearm to defend yourself in Wisconsin, and it is now. So the law has changed, and so for me, it's like, this is a no-brainer, like, to make this better or fix the situation. But I've tried like I said, I call the governor's office about once a week. The judge, well, he was the district attorney at the time, but the guy, he's now a judge, is a friend of mine on LinkedIn. You know, we're friends. You know, for better or for worse, I don't know. He may be watching this, but
Right. I want to go back to answer a couple of things here. So, Anne Marie, I do disclose during the interview process, again, as I mentioned in the comments of my post yesterday. I'm very cautious as to who and when I make that disclosure, but bare minimum, as soon as they call me and present the offer, I always say, okay, what are you looking for in your background check and how far back are you looking before we even do anything else? So I always ask that question because, again, my conviction is 16 years ago, and sometimes they're looking for specific things. Unfortunately, in the 3 cases so far and now pending 4th, you know, either they say they're going back 7 or 10 years and that doesn't matter or whatever. But yes, I always bring it up prior to the background check being sent.
Mm-hmm. It's better. I mean, in my little bit of experience, and they teach you that, you know, in those cognitive restructuring classes or whatever, and reentry classes, is just lay it out there. I mean, when it comes down to it, don't make them find out in the background check.
Right.
Tell them up front.
Right.
Get ahead of the curve a little bit by showing them you're going to be honest about it and all that kind of stuff.
Honesty goes a long way. I found I'm very honest. I don't even know. It's just I just tell people all the truth all the time now, and that's just kind of how I am. And for better or for worse, it's easier to just tell them, you know, because they're gonna find out. That's honestly, I changed my name on LinkedIn because every time somebody'd find me on LinkedIn, they go Google me, and my crime actually made national news. So for the rest of my life, you're gonna be able to Google me, and please don't do it because I don't want any more hits on the websites that have my story. But as soon as I'm in IT, so as soon as somebody types my name in Google, they see it, and you know, they don't even call you that at that point.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like somebody brought up on my post yesterday, you know, why don't you prepare something or include it on your resume or provide a statement, you know, up front? And it's like I've actually tried doing that. I've sat in an interview and watched the recruiter's face when I've made a disclosure too early in the process and just seen my rejection come, you know, right there.
Yeah, and then when they have those applications where you have to tell what your crime is, I get to those and I'm like, forget about it. Like, if I have to tell them I'm a felon going into the application, it's over. Right. I just I'm like, whatever. I'm not even going to fill it out because you got 2 hours or whatever to fill out an application, and you're automatically at the bottom of the pile. If every other applicant dies, they might call you.
Maybe.
Right. But if in certain states, it's different because, like, when I was in Wisconsin, they at least protect people. If the circumstances don't pertain to the job, and I think they banned the box now too. So there's no automatic bar for people. They have to evaluate each person, and you know.
Yeah, ban the box was a huge step. DJ is talking about getting voting rights back. In some states, that's happened. In the state of Colorado, it's been within the last year and a half that felons on paper have been given the right to vote. So I was actually able to vote in this past election, even though I am still on parole.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know that in other states, Texas, for example, I know you've said, Chris, you don't have that opportunity.
I do not. And it just drives me nuts, man. I've been out for a little over 5 years now. I could have voted in Trump's first election, and I could have voted in this election. So I've been out for 2 presidential elections now. And even though that's my pet peeve, man, is from the president on down to the mayor of the city, or the city council or the school board or whatever, things that they do, they have the right to make the laws and make policies that affect me. Mm-hmm. And I have absolutely no say-so in who I get to choose to put into office. But I still have to think, Yeah, but I still have to pay taxes. Like I still have to pay
Yep,
the
you
damn
do.
paycheck, man. And so I'm like, that is, I mean, that just irritates us. I can do it when I get off parole. Well, I've got another year and a half ish left, um, but it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Right.
There, there's I don't remember what state it's in, but he's actually, I think there's actually a senator that's incarcerated right now. They let him be in the Senate because you can be in a Senate. That's the U.S. Senate is the only thing that you can get to. That's the only way that you can get any representation is if you run. And the Democrat and Republican Party will not take you because they actually have a box on their application too, and they check your criminal background. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
If you're going to run as a representative of the party, you're right. Yep.
so you got to be an independent at that point, and you got
Hmm.
to be a third party. So, and
Right.
it's like almost impossible to do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the expungement question, that those are largely taken case by case, and the laws vary state by state. So I know in the state of Colorado, I can't even ask for any kind of expungement until I have been off of paper for more than 10 years. And I'm not even off paper yet. So
Mm.
I don't know how it works in every other state, but or if either of you guys have looked into it. I know Travis, you kind of shared a little bit about your
In
experience.
Minnesota, because that's where my other conviction was. Minnesota allows you like within a year or two. It depends on the severity of the crime.
Hmm.
They have a actual and really nice form even where it lays out how soon you can go. But I think it's like 4 or 5 years. Within 4 or 5 years, you can actually go in front of the judge, and the judge will determine whether or not it's a benefit to society. And that's kind of the other thing that I like about that system is that it's not just up to the prosecutor because in my case the judge basically said either you got to get the DA to change it or you got to get a governor's pardon. Well, the judge doesn't know anything about me. She's not able to consider any of the circumstances of the crime. I was 19 at the time. I was basically a kid when I did it, and my parents didn't have money for a lawyer or anything like that. But um, you when you're a kid and they're like, well, you're gonna have facing 10 years in prison or whatever. You're like, oh, well, what can I do? Well, we'll give you probation. We'll give you 2 years probation. Well, yeah, sure, we're gonna take that. Of course, why? I'll only 2 years and I'm done with this and I can go back to living my life. Well,
Hmm.
nobody said, no, this is a life conviction, is what it is. And somebody asked about being off paper, that's being on probation. So, you think when you get off probation and you discharge, you should get all your rights back. And, you know, the right to possess a firearm, you know, it's something that the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about you get to possess a firearm, unless this. It just says that you have the right to keep and bear arms. And now it's actually disenfranchised my wife. My wife can't own a gun anymore because I can't have a gun in my house because we
Hmm.
know the SWAT team will come. So, it's like, it's a crazy thing. My kids, I can't raise them. I was raised hunting
Yeah.
and I can't take my kids hunting. I mean, I can't get risk getting caught with a gun. Because I'm pretty sure most states, Texas is the only state that I know of that a felon can possess a firearm in their own home.
Yeah. I think you have to be 5 years off paper before that happens, I think. But I'm like you. I grew up hunting, and I hunt with a crossbow now because I can't.
Hmm.
I like hunting with a crossbow. It's great, but I am a gun hunter. Like I never even picked up a bow to hunt until I got out of prison. Um, I'm not one of those guys that likes this. I like the sport of it, but I'm not one of those guys that likes the stalk and the chase and all that. Like I want to shoot something. You know what I mean? Like I want to put meat in the freezer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I'm trying, right now just to get that back because
Hmm.
I mean, I had somebody actually on my back porch one night and I was like, what am I gonna do? Throw rocks at them?
Yeah.
Like they were literally on my back porch and it was just kids or whatever messing around or whatever. But if somebody breaks into my house, I have nothing to defend myself.
Mm-mm.
And unfortunately, the world we live in, it's kind of a dangerous world now. So,
Right.
um,
One thing that really bothers me at this point, because I mean, my parents are gracious enough to let me live with them for the time being. And one of the parole conditions that came up when I moved back into my parents' house is they had to take down their security cameras. So my parents can't have, I mean, their security is cameras on the outside of the house, and they can't have those up as long as I'm living here. My dad can't have his guns in the house as long as I'm living here. You know, and it really is this burden on everybody
Yeah.
around you and everybody who lives you and supports you. And I've seen the way that my parents are treated when, I mean, not with my current parole officer, but with a parole officer in the past has come to my house to do a home check. And, my dad's office is right next to my bedroom, and she's standing in the doorway of my dad's office yelling at him while he's on a work call. And it's like, this is their house. You are intruding in their home right now because I live here, and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
they don't see it that way, though. Unfortunately,
Right. They don't. But that's
They-
the reality of it. Just because they have a legal right to come to my house and search whatever they want to, I understand that. But treating my parents that way when I'm the one who's on parole,
Right.
it doesn't matter if you're allowed to be here or not. You are still an intruder.
Right.
You're not welcome here. Just because I have to let you in doesn't mean I want to.
In tech, well, I've been really blessed. Like all my parole officers have been really great. I've had 3 of them, and they've all been really respectful to me, and they've all been really respectful to my family. Like when I was staying with my granddad, when my parole officer would come in, he'd shake my granddad's hand and ask how he was doing, and call him sir, and just really, really respectful. But when they would come into my room to do a look around, like that's the only place they went. They didn't go to my granddad's room. They didn't go in the kitchen. They looked around the living room or whatever, I guess, just to see if there's anything obvious. But like they were very specific that was my area, so that's where they went instead of searching the whole house. That was my granddad's room, so they didn't go in there. They went to my room. So I've been really blessed in that aspect where all my parole officers have been just super respectful to me and my
Right.
family.
And for the most part, that has been my experience. This was a one-time thing, and she actually wasn't even my parole officer. She just happened to be the one who was doing the home check that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was. Yeah.
I got very lucky in my case. I actually had breakfast with my probation officer a couple weeks ago. I bought her and her husband their breakfast because we ran into each other at Perkins or whatever, and I had a great relationship with her. I mean, it's not always, nobody really says that. I'm guarantee I'm probably like the only person that says that, but I mean, she did take an interest in trying to help me, and at the time, I really needed that. I mean, like I said, I was kind of being dumb. I'm making dumb decisions, and she could have thrown me in jail so many times, just because I was being stupid, and she didn't. And that also made a big difference because I had other friends that had the same probation officer. My wife's ex-husband had the same probation officer, and he did not have the same experience with her that I did. And so she had the ability to ratchet it up and do stuff like that, but as long as I was doing good, I mean, she knew I was in college. I was an IT director for a cellular company at the time, and so I went to all my meetings and paid all my money or whatever. So I was the last person that she had to worry about. But like I said, other people were not like that, and I treated her nice because she treated me nice, and so sometimes that relationship too can mean a lot in getting somebody out of the system and moving forward or whatever. And people that get treated terribly by their probation officer are not going to come out the other end and necessarily have the highest regard for those types of people.
Right.
Yep. And Nathan and I talked about this on the first episode we did of this, where You know, the parole officers are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like in Texas, their caseload is way more than what it should be.
Oh yeah.
I think my parole officer has 40 or 50 guys that he has to deal with on a monthly basis. It's 40 to 50 office visits, which some of them might be on quarterly or yearly or whatever, but that's going to be a low percentage. 40 or 50 office visits and 40 or 50 home visits a month, in between dealing with the knuckleheads that are acting a fool. And so just from that aspect of it, I get it. You know, they don't have a lot of time and resources. So when you get one that is willing to give you a little time and a little effort, then that's something definitely to be appreciative of.
Yeah. Yep. So what else do we got? I've been trying to keep up with the comments, but
the comments are going off.
Yeah, so one of the things I saw in there is just like I said, going back to the judge and stuff, and we, in my particular case, I actually been, like I said, communicating with the district attorney's office, and I've had a couple job offers now that have been impacted by this or whatever, and I'm hoping that as a result of this experience, I've went back to some of the employers, and I actually am waiting for one of the employers. They said that they want to sit down with me and talk about it. So I don't know what that exactly means or whatever, but if they would have looked at the circumstances of the case, if the employers will go back and actually look at what happened, that makes a big difference or even the judges. Like I said, my judges have like 5 seconds to look at a little case file about you, and then they render a decision, and then they're off to the next 100 cases that they have.
Right.
And when a judge uses their own ability to look at a person, and there's a traffic court judge out in Rhode Island that if you ever see him, he's got a bunch of videos on YouTube and stuff about all these people that come in with like parking tickets and different fines and stuff like that. And he's always looking at try to help them out, and like, if it's a single mother or whatever, he gives them a break. And that compassion from the bench impacts people's lives. And so even going back to those judges and stuff and saying, hey, look, this happened, whatever, and I want to make my life better, give me an opportunity. There's some of them that look at that, and some of them just think, oh, he's just a criminal, and they just throw you away. But it's getting better. I think as they've realized that they can't just lock everybody up in a prison, the cost of putting somebody in prison is like $50,000 a year. And why not send that person to college? There's an opportunity there. I would have liked to win in the military. If based on my circumstances of my crime, I would have volunteered to go to the National Guard. And if I would have had to do a National Guard tour for a couple of years to get out of my situation, that's another opportunity where you take somebody that's maybe making bad decisions and put them on the right path, and it's kind of mutually beneficial to society. And then also once you are always who you surround yourself with. And I've been lucky that I surround myself with people that are business owners and people that are very intelligent. And so that's how that helps us move along. But it's even interesting because, I've been meeting all these veterans and people that have been in the military, and then they come out of the military and they get a drug charge. And that was another thing one of my friends brought up, and I never realized this, but there's 400,000 service members who've received what's called a bad paper discharge. And they get hooked on drugs, and then they get thrown out of the military because they get caught doing drugs. And once they get thrown out, they lose their access to the VA and all of the social systems that would supposedly take care of them and help them. And a lot of the reasons why they're hooked on drugs is because they had to go to war and do a bunch of bad stuff.
Right.
And so we also criminalized our American heroes, the people that everybody says that we're supposed to, stand up for and everything. Those people also, even though they served this country, they got thrown under this bus too. So it's not just people that made mistakes and it had a bad life. It's sometimes people had a really good life and they made they got addicted to drugs. Really has a lot to do with most people's crimes. I mean, if you're using, you're going to make bad decisions, and it's only when you quit using that you start realizing, wow, I was
Mm-hmm.
really dumb for doing whatever that was.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I committed my crime when I was drunk, and then I was so depressed or messed up over going from a cop to being a felon that I started using drugs, and then that led to a whole string of bad decisions and dumb shit.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's one thing that a lot of people, or at least these lawmakers, whether they don't think about it or they just don't care, and actually society as a whole, if we're looking at it, and this is something that I know that we've all addressed in our posts and our comments, but these guys come out of prison. They are literally released with nothing but $100 and a state ID card.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky, you have family who can give you a place to stay. Otherwise, you're in the homeless shelter.
Yep.
You don't have transportation unless your parole officer happens to have a bus pass for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to rebuild your life with this.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of these people, you're applying for these jobs that you're qualified for. All of these people are just completely rejecting you. You can't find a job. Even if you do find a job, you can't find an apartment complex that will rent to you.
Right.
What's convincing you to stay on the right path and do things the right way? For all too many guys, I've seen it time and time again. It's like, why did you end up relapsing? Why did you end up committing another crime? Why did you end up doing whatever? And it's because there wasn't really another option.
Right.
I didn't have the opportunity for a job. I didn't have the opportunity to find a place to live. And you know what? I can make money selling drugs. I can take care of my family doing this. I can get something out of doing that. Even if it means going back to prison, guess what? I was able to put some food on the table, which I wasn't able to do by trying to do things the right way. And it's a really, really sad state of affairs when that's what the country is where, yeah, you have to do right. You have to do better. We want you to be rehabilitated. We want you to be successful, allegedly. But every single possible barrier that we can put on your way is thrown up. And the only viable option for too many people is going back to crime.
Yeah.
They call it the Department of Corrections, but the recidivism rate would say that they're not doing very much correcting of anything at all.
Right.
And I always think about it as I talked about the house thing, is if somebody is a homeowner and they have a good life, they are going to generally, in my opinion, make better decisions than somebody that has nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're saying that, Nathan, that reminded me of the time I lost a job. The job didn't work. I uprooted my family and I moved them a long ways away, and the job didn't work out. So on day 90, I lost the job, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And I had $20, so I took that to Office Depot and I started getting some flyers made, and color copies were $1 and black and white ones were like 10 cents. So I had 5 color copies made and I had the rest in black and white, and I went and knocked on doors with a flyer and handed that out, and I got clients or whatever with it. But at the same time, I was also doing other stuff that I shouldn't have been doing, and I almost got myself in a lot more trouble because I was involved with somebody that was dealing, and it was just marijuana. But at the same time, I was like, it was tempting because he had money and cars and all this cash and all these other things, and it was very hard for me to say, well, I'm struggling with my business. At the time, that was only $20 I had. So I spent myself all of my money, and rent was due. I had a $1,500 rent payment to make. And that almost made a big mistake.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was able to get out of that system. But again, it just, you almost end up back. And if you get a second felony, it's over. I believe that one felony you may be able to get out of, but if you ever get a second felony, I think life's over with at that point. I don't I don't see any judge or governor ever giving you a second chance on that.
Right.
And that's, I mean, your story, what you just told, is the case of so many guys that get out. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they're down to the last $20, and you know they have a chance to come up on a quick 50 or 100 by selling something for somebody, and that leads. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
what do you think desperate guys are going to do?
Right. And
Like
then, I mean,
you were
I
the
don't know.
exception, not the norm in that.
Right. And I don't know about you guys, what you've seen as far as different parole conditions or just people getting revoked for like the absolute dumbest things. Like I can understand if you reoffend or if you, relapse or if you whatever, I can see reasons where, going back on a parole violation is
Yeah.
a viable option. I've seen a guy go back because he had an unauthorized relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He went back to prison for having a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen guys go back to prison on a parole violation for being out of location, and not like they were in a bar or they were, no, like you had permission to go to that Walmart and you went to the wrong one.
Yeah.
Out of location, parole violation.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that make sense? Like
A lot
seriously.
of those probation officers, it's their discretion to what they allow or don't allow. And once you get on probation, most people don't realize this, but it's just an administrative hearing to send you back to prison once you're on. And it's
Mhm.
not, probation sounds so great when you're like, well, I don't have to go to jail, I get probation. And I was always so proud of like, oh, lucky I got probation, until you have law enforcement contact. And simple as I didn't pay a fine, and I lost my driver's license, and then I got pulled over, and the cops found a piece of glass in the car that had residual of cocaine on it. I got charged that night with 3 felonies: trafficking cocaine, trafficking marijuana, and some other crime. I got like 6 crimes that night. And at the end of the day, it was just like a minor possession charge. But automatically, because I was on felony probation,
Mhm.
we're going to just nail this
Everything.
guy,
Everything.
everything we can charge him with. And
Let
yeah,
the
it's
judge
like,
sort it out from there.
yeah, and the judge says, well, we'll just give you another year of probation or whatever. And
Right.
luckily, I'm knocking on wood right now, because my probation officer could have sent me back to jail for that. And I just I'm so lucky that I never had what you're describing there, because I had people that I was in there with, and they were on revocation hearings, and I know people that were revocated and went and did 3 years for my wife's cousin actually had a no contact with us, and they revoked him because he violated the no contact.
Mhm.
And we let him live at our house. We had basically we could have, I guess, asked him to leave, but we didn't. But because he was living at our house, they revoked him and they sent him back for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried writing the DA, and we're like, hey, it's fine. Like, he had an
Mhm.
alcohol problem, and as long as he wasn't drinking, we knew that he would be okay. So he was allowed to live with us as long as he did not drink. And unfortunately, later down the road, he did go back to drinking and stuff. But whenever he was with us, he never was using, and so he was a great person. But it's just like I said, it's all in who you hang out with. And my mom and my brother actually work for the Department of Corrections, so um, anytime I got in trouble, my mom actually had to write to the governor, and she was at risk of losing her 6-figure job every time I got in trouble, even though I was a grown adult, and I lived on my own and everything. Just because she associated with me, she had
Mhm.
to write a report to the governor. And all her friends are cops, and obviously she, my brother and stuff like that. Um, you would think that it'd be better for people that have gotten out to have associations, positive associations with people in law enforcement. And I mean, my daughter, even, she's 12 or whatever, she's afraid of the cops now because one day she saw her dad get arrested. And I have had to work so hard because I'm not anti-law enforcement at all. I
Right.
want to be a cop. That was my dream. I was in college to be a cop when I got this charge. And I just I don't want that I don't want her to have that, because I grew up, my dad wasn't a fan of law enforcement or whatever, and when you grow up in that kind of environment, you don't have respect for authority. And for better or for worse, if you at least give a police officer respect, they're going to treat you with reasonable respect most of the time. There's some bad
Hmm.
apples out there, but I've had better luck being nice than I have been by being a jerk to them anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's one thing. And I will probably say something to this effect on every one of these shows we do. But like, I'm the same way. I'm not anti-law enforcement,
Mm.
and I am actually pro law enforcement. Um, and and I hope that everybody realizes too. And hearing us tell our stories, it's not a sob story. It's not, nobody's looking for any kind of pity.
Right.
And we all do realize that there are people that have committed felonies that get out and don't act right.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not like everybody that gets out of prison is going to be wanting to do what they're supposed to do. Like, I see guys go back all the time because they just don't want to act right. But it's I would say that's not the larger percentage.
It's not.
Most people never want to see inside those walls again, and
No.
I mean, I would say it's probably rare for somebody that wants to go back and work for a prison system. I mean, like I said, I've been trying to work for the very institutions that kind of took my life away, but my whole goal in this now in my life, and why I talk about my story, is because I hope that somebody hears this and they, one, change their stigma about
Absolutely.
what felons are, and then the second thing is maybe a kid will hear this story from me now, because I had the Scared Straight program or whatever. They brought in guys and they yelled at you and screamed at you and tried to scare you
Yeah.
out of prison. Prison's actually not that scary, I don't think. I mean, it can be, I guess, but what's scary is when you get out and you have a life sentence, that your kids that weren't even born when you got in trouble or whatever, they're now
Hmm.
punished, and it's the eight, whatever, however many 40 years or whatever after prison that you got to
Right.
live with. The time that you spend in is one thing, but being out in the world is a whole different thing, and it's
Right.
hard enough without having that conviction.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it doesn't affect. My mistakes affected me obviously because I went to prison, but it also affected my
Hmm.
family. My family did the time with me.
Right.
My wife is doing this parole with me, having to put up with all my stipulations and not being able to travel and all this other kind of crazy stuff. Nobody in their right mind is going to want that, but sometimes they just get stuck in that, whether it be from they just don't want to act right, or whether it be from society or the system not doing anything but giving them $100 in a state ID. There's so many factors that are involved in that, but I agree with Travis. Nobody in their right mind is going to want to go see the inside of those walls again.
No, it's the food's no good, the treatment's no good, the people that are in there are no good. I mean, it's funny too. I was actually just reading a story about felons on jury duty, and there's this preconceived notion that felons are going to be easier on other felons, which
They're not.
no, they're not at
They're
all.
not.
Like,
I'd be like,
especially
bro.
when you hear some of the charges. I've been watching the live court system, waiting for my case number to just magically get called one day. So every single day I watched the live stream. Because of COVID, they're live streaming all the courts. And there's a guy on there the last week that held a gun to his wife's head and told her that he was going to kill her, and the kids saw it, and there was a just nasty description of what happened, and I just was like terrorized by what this guy did. And he got a signature bond, and she called in on the hearings like, oh, this is all lies, it never happened, and I want him to come back and stuff like that. And it's like, you let him out and you're going to let him have contact with the person that he just did? The judge is like, make sure you don't hold the gun to your wife's head anymore. And it's like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. They would have hung me for that. But,
Right.
nowadays it's just like unbelievable the stuff they're giving signature bonds out for. And it's like, what is going on? Like, I understand that they have limited space, but people are just they're doing crazy stuff. Like people that got cases open in multiple states and multiple different things all going on. And it's like felony, robbing, doing this, child endangerment. And I just like, wow, like I can't believe I was
Mm-hmm.
in that same courtroom with those same people. And like I said, when I did it, it was a big deal. But I shake my head and I see us like, how is this happening? I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But you're right. I mean, both of you mentioned how this impacts your family, and I did to some extent. But really, I mean, when it comes to me, like I've never really wanted kids, even when I was growing up and whatever. That just wasn't the life that I ever saw for myself. But
Yeah.
like that's completely off the table for me now. Like I would not bring another person to be impacted by this life. Like it's already a shame that my family is impacted to the extent that they are. I would not add another person to that. I
Right.
could not in good conscience do that.
It's hard. I mean, I can't go on field trips with my kid. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that seems like a dumb thing, but it's like when my daughter was 6 or 7, she's like, "How come you can't go on this field trip with me, Dad?" And it's like, "Oh, I have a felony." And how do you explain to your 6-year-old what a felony is?
Right.
And I mean, in good conscience, I had to tell her, what happened and what it meant, but I mean, how do you get in a position? She wasn't even born when it happened. So it's just a wild scenario.
Yeah,
Shit
Jennifer.
ass kids.
The running joke with me is that's why we have dogs. My wife and I don't have kids either. We've got 4 dogs, and the joke we always tell is, we can put them in their kennel and shut the door, and nobody calls CPS on us. But it's kind of frowned upon when you do that. When you do that with your kids.
I'm lucky
Yep.
right now. My wife had 3 kids before we met, and so I've raised one of them since he was in diapers, and I have seen the other 2 grow up. One of them's just turned 19, and the other one's 16 now. So we're about to get his driver's license, and then I got my daughter who's 12. And like I said before, we have to cater all of our life around Travis because we
Yeah.
didn't think about it, but we went down to Florida and we wanted to go see the Blue Angels. I can't. There's my dog. He's upset because he's not in the live. Um, but you can't go. You can't go on a military base. I can't
Nope.
go. I'm not allowed on a military base without the
Mm-mm.
executive office or whatever the president to say I can go. I can't work in for any contractors. I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're surrounded by defense contractors,
Right. I'm in
and
Colorado Springs. That's all that we have here.
yeah. So the whole industry that I am a defender of America, and I want to protect this country, but I don't think that they're ever going to let me in because of the background checking thing. And I never did anything. I never had crimes of dishonesty. I probably had crimes of too much honesty, anyways, because I admitted what I did when I did it,
Mm-hmm.
and I took the consequences.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of upsetting.
All right, guys. So we have hit our 1 hour. So we're going to go ahead and call this one a day. If
Right
you are
on.
interested in hearing more of these conversations, our next one is scheduled for July 21st. So that's 3 weeks from today. And we will be hosting Jennifer Brick to talk about, she has, her bachelor's degree in criminology, and she has some experience working in that realm. So that should be a very fun conversation as well.
It is, and she wants to talk about restorative justice
Right.
instead of like punitive type
Mhm.
justice.
Right. So that will be a good one. That's 3 weeks from today, same time, with Jennifer Brick. And if you are interested in taking part in a lighter conversation, here in about an hour, I'm going to go live with DJ Durante, who is present in our comments as the Silver Fox. So that will be in 1 hour from now, again on my page. Thank you, everyone, for joining us,
Yep.
and we will see you next time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
TJ,
guys.
for coming on, man. We appreciate you.
Have a good day.